Hi everyone, Daljeet Peterson here from astrolab21.com. In this video we're going to talk about Pisces season 2022. And posting this video a little bit earlier than normal. Pisces season still a couple weeks away, but I'm going to be moving cross country here right in the middle of Pisces season this year. So this entire studio, this place I've called home here for the last, I've been 21 years here in Los Angeles. So sort of a bittersweet moment as I reflect on and say goodbye to LA and return to where it all started for me, which is back on the East Coast in New England. So also I thought it'd be insightful to share with you some of the configurations in my own chart and sort of how I use astrology and some of the significations that are really well aligned with this big life change and big move for me. Essentially, if we think about the home and issues around buying a new house, moving, changing locations, where you call home, as we know, as we learn, that's all fourth house issues. And as it would be, there's a lot of fourth house energy going on for me this year and has been for the last year or so. So I'm going to share my chart to start before we get into Pisces season, just to give you a little insight into some of the sort of ways I use astrology and how this stuff tends to show up for us in our lives, because I think it's really interesting. So if I were to pull up my own chart, which I have here, and if we were to look at the transits for what's going to be going on here, and I'm actually closing on a home, my first house actually, it's pretty exciting. So March 1st, and you'll see we've got Sun conjunct Jupiter in my fourth house. Jupiter, the Lord of my ascendant, as a wait a minute, sorry. The Lord of my ascendant as a Sag rising, which I think is pretty interesting. So as it would be, and well, the Sun will have conjuncted my North Node in the few days right before that. So a lot of energy for focus on the home. So a good time to be moving house. Now, of course, I knew that we would have Pisces transiting my fourth house for most of this year, starting in late 2021, and it previewed a little bit, and we actually started looking at homes, and this whole process, we actually put an offer in, and it got rejected, and so as Jupiter went in and then retrograded back into my third house and had to do more homework and get some things lined up, this whole process has almost perfectly aligned with this Jupiter transit in my natal chart. And then I really got a confirmation about it when I did my solar return chart for the year 2021, which is something I do every year on my birthday, sort of a little birthday gift to myself. I'm sure a lot of astrologers do that. You cast your solar return chart for the year just to set a tone for that year, right? What is coming down the pipe? And it was really interesting. It was a Pisces rising year. I'm in a Pisces rising year. So Pisces is on the ascendant for my solar return chart for this year, which is the natural sign on my fourth house natally, right? And then Jupiter was exactly rising here. Again, the Lord or ruler of my natal chart as a Sag rising. And then check out where the solar return occurred this year. That 8 degrees Gemini where I was born happened to be in my fourth house of my solar return chart, pretty tightly conjunct the North Node. And remember, I have North Node in my natal chart as well. And I had Mercury and Venus here as well. So there's this sort of fourth house stellium going on for me for this year. So no big surprise that I'm choosing to make this big move and change my home. And in many ways, returning to my home. Going back to where it all started. And there's something about the nodal axis that I think's at play for me here as I've gone out into the world, and now I'm sort of coming back to a sense of my roots, a sense of my tradition, my ancestral home, at least as an American. So I thought I'd share that. I think that's a pretty interesting insight into how sometimes these astrological configurations can play out, and why it's really helpful to use astrology in your own life, right? For me, it was very reassuring as, my partner and I contemplated the move, and I'm like, when would we do this? And I was able to really go, yeah, the next couple years seems right. Like, I even said it's going to be spring 2022. And this was back in early 2021 when we started the process. So, it just gave me that sort of sense of peace of mind. It gave me a broader perspective on where I was, and sort of reassurance that, yeah, this feels right. And, it's just getting reinforced by this alignment of my planets in my chart. So I think that's really interesting to look at. But enough about that. You're tuned in here for the Pisces season forecast. So let's just jump right into that and bring up the chart for Pisces season, which I have up here now. And, I have an idea of what I'm calling this season aligning with unconditional love. And I think that's a real potential here. Of course, Pisces, when we think about the sign of Pisces, that's always associated with this idea of unconditional love, of the transcendent, of the cosmic, of the global, of the ineffable, right? So, this is a time of year when we always contemplate the ideas of big love. But as we're going to see, not only do we have the sun transiting through the sign of Pisces, we've had Neptune there, as it has been since 2012. And we also have Jupiter in Pisces, as I've just been talking about in my own chart. So those three planets, there's sort of this triple transit energy going on in Pisces this year, that it's going to make this particular Pisces season during this Neptune and Pisces cycle, I think one of the most potent of the whole cycle, the entire 18-year cycle. So we'll take a look at that. Okay, so here's the chart for the initiation of Pisces season 2022. We see the sun just ingressing here into 0 degrees of Pisces on February 18th. And we see there's an interesting sort of mystic rectangle on that day as the sun enters into Pisces, with the moon in opposition to Neptune, this Pisces Virgo axis, which is going to be sort of heavily aspected and emphasized during this Pisces season, as it always is, but particularly here with all this Pisces energy. So the new moon and the full moon, particularly, a lot of emphasis on the Pisces Virgo axis. But here's sort of like a preview of that, and it's sort of a preview of the full moon that we're going to have in this Pisces season. Because there's something really interesting that's happening this time of year, or in this time in our sort of planetary alignment. All of the planets are in one sort of sector in the house. They're all in one hemisphere, really, right? We can see everything sort of pinned in by the nodes from this Mercury, or from this Scorpio-Taurus axis on. Everything is within that section of the sky. It's all really focused on, a lot of it is focused on, from Capricorn through Pisces, all of that last quadrant of the zodiac, very socially oriented, a very sort of transpersonal, collective type of energy, which is why we're dealing with so many sort of big picture issues, how we fit into them, and all of these issues that we're facing as a society, really worldwide. Right, the things that the coronavirus has brought into perspective for us, the issues that we're dealing with, the fallouts for that, the economic issues, all this Pluto and Capricorn we've been talking about. We can really see how that energy is all moving through that part of the sky. And because the sun has been moving through that quadrant in this part of the solar year, as we're in winter into spring, just adds emphasis, Mercury and Venus moving with it. We've got Mars here now. So a lot of focus on the outer, the other, the collective. And that will be a big theme for the rest of this solar year, right? Pisces season is the last month of the solar year, right? It's 12 of 12. It's like the 12th step in the sun's annual 12-step program. And it all ends with Pisces, and then we reset when we move into Aries on the spring equinox. So we're really putting it close to a solar year with Pisces season. That's always something to keep in mind. We celebrate sort of the annual calendar on New Year's. This is the true astrological calendar. We're in the last month of the solar season. So good to take that perspective on things. So let me just look at my notes here, because I want to move through some of the most important and salient days that we want to look out for during this Pisces season. As I said, we can anticipate the Sun is going to make a conjunction with Jupiter and with Neptune during this Pisces season. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but maybe we just talk a little bit about Sun in Pisces, right? What does this month, this part of the cycle, portend for us? Well, wherever the Sun is, it's really about this focus on the creative self-expression. It's really our individuality and the sort of the soul's life force. It's the desire. It's the evolution of our souls. It's what we are becoming. It's how we are trying to reach our highest potential. It's our purpose, our striving, our sort of our telos, if you will. And so when that moves into, when the Sun is in the sign of Pisces, well, we're called to connect to this much deeper spiritual, rather soulful type of expression. The qualities of the Sun takes on the qualities of Pisces. We're talking about mutable water. We're talking about the biggest and deepest of the water signs. This gets us into the truly transcendent and the universal, right? It has this highly sensitive and attuned quality. It can be incredibly idealistic. It can be incredibly creative and artful. Often has a musical quality. We think about music and poetry because we associate that with Neptune and also with Pisces. And of course, with Neptune being in its own sign during this time, this is a big phase, big time for this Pisces energy to emerge. So that's why I'm calling for, this alignment with unconditional love, because that really is the deepest message of Pisces and Neptune, right? It is unconditional love. So hopefully we can tap some of that. Of course, you can always see what the shadow side of this type of configuration can, constellate, right? You get this sort of escapist tendencies. It can be very vacillating and equivocating. There's the sense of being confused and misled and deceived. There's a lot of self-deception. Ideas of delusion can come up. This is a sign and a symbol that's powerfully associated with addictions of all kinds, whether addictions to drugs and alcohol, addictions to relationships that don't serve us, addictions to foods. But alcohol is a big one, actually, and drugs. Just think about that. Trying to fill the void of the need to be connected to something, a higher power. And I've always thought it's interesting why we call hard alcohol spirits, right? Because it's trying to, it's a substitute for the connection with true spirit. So something to keep in mind this Pisces season and every Pisces season, and just people with Pisces energy in general, right? It's a real tendency that can show up in the archetype and those of us who are working through it in a powerful way. I want to move forward then to the next sort of big day on the calendar is going to be February 24th. And if we look at what's going on the 24th, we're going to get the exact conjunction of Venus and Mars. And this is a big theme for this Pisces season. Right? They're conjoining in Capricorn, and whenever we get that start of a new Venus-Mars cycle, it's a really intense, personal, emotional, and it really puts us in connection, in touch with our desire nature. If you think about the combined archetypes of Venus and Mars, right? Venus, they're both connected to desire, right? Venus is that law of attraction. It's what we are trying to bring to us. It has that quality of bringing in and attracting, right? The law of attraction is ruled by Venus. What are we attracted to? What do we desire? What do we love? What brings us pleasure? What brings us joy? What kind of people? What kind of places? What kind of experiences, right? What qualities? What possessions? What things really spark joy for us and give us the sense of gratitude and pleasure and make us feel just a sense of love and joy, right? That's Venus, attraction. Whereas Mars is the energy we have to go out and get the objects of our desire. It serves the role of being the active energy, right? Think about Mars, right? It's projective, right? So we go after. It's connected with our sexuality and what we desire. So when we get a new conjunction and this cycle starts anew, we always want to look at, well, where is that taking place? So this season is focused on Capricorn, right? So there's this rather earthy and practical, structural quality to this Venus-Mars cycle that we're about to initiate. And we're going to get to it a little later as we come up to a big day. One of the biggest days, I think, of the astrological year for all of 2022 is coming up during Pisces season this month. So we're going to talk about that. But maybe let's just look at, well, it's going to be Venus, Mars, Pluto, which I'm going to talk about. But I want to talk about just Venus and Mars together, to set the table for this configuration, I should say. As we see, the qualities of sensuality, of this idea of relationship. You know, Venus rules both Libra and Taurus, right? It has all these connections to the sense of the feminine, the sense of our indulgence in the sensual nature of life, sexuality, desire, beauty and romance, right? A sense of self-worth, connection, pleasure, right? The erotic, right? And we can see how that dovetails nicely with Mars. Mars is that libidinal, the energetic, the assertion, right? It's all about these instincts that we have, these primordial sort of unconscious desires in some ways. Or, well, Mars makes the desires conscious, I should say. It's not necessarily unconscious, but it's instinctive, I think is a better way of saying it. But if you look at these combined archetypes, you can see the potential, right? You can have the instinct for beauty, right? But you could also have, you know, a sort of use of force or power in areas of self-indulgence or money, right? You could have foolish glamour. You could have foolish glamour. We could have, you know, a shameless sense of willpower, right? You know, we could have, you know, a sense of soft lust, right? There's many ways that these archetypes can combine, which is, again, why I love these word clouds, because I think they're great ways of sort of stimulating and getting in touch with the archetypal nature of what these planetary functions symbolize. There's many facets to each of them, and when we get them interacting, there's all kinds of ways that they can manifest, right? And we could also bring in the picture of, we could consider, well, what is happening when both of these functions take on the qualities of Capricorn, right? Then you get all of these possible combinations within that archetype of structure, of hierarchy, of being and finding your place in society and in the world, of hard work and discipline, right? So some of those values and some of those desires may be aligning with, you know, the idea of getting ahead in life, the idea of, you know, making a career move, of being more powerfully engaged with your work life or within the structure of society, right? All these things that we would associate with the sign Capricorn. So a lot to consider here as we consider Venus and Mars, and that's powerful. And again, we're going to see this contact with Pluto, which is going to just exacerbate and intensify to the nth degree this Venus-Mars conjunction, right? So that's important. And so this whole month, so it's coming into, you know, starting with this conjunction on the 24th, and then this energy is really going to be moving forward in a powerful way over the course of sort of the next 2 or 3 weeks from there. The other thing we see here is we've got Mercury's moved into a square with Uranus. So that's something, you know, the two mentally focused planetary functions, if we think about Uranus as the higher octave of Mercury. Mercury is sort of our mind, our mental processes, our way of thinking, of communicating, of expressing, right? And then Uranus is the higher mind. It's the download from the sort of universal conscious, from our higher self. We often get a lot of insight and really sudden bursts of sort of creative wisdom or genius, or very sudden events. We have very unexpected encounters with very interesting or eccentric or rebellious type of people or groups or organizations. It just has this really unexpected energy, right? And we always think about Uranus. My favorite way to describe Uranus is freedom from the known. That's what the famous astrologer Jeff Wolf Green referred to it. I think it was the subtitle of his book on Uranus, which is a really good one. So, when you get these two really highly mentally focused energies coming together in this square, it's a fixed square. You got Mercury moving through fixed Aquarius, an air sign, very idealistic, very scientifically minded, technological, rational, hyper-rational, but could be a tendency to get too fixated on your own ideas, a sense of rigidity about your thinking or your communication. Aquarius can have that sort of cold, detached quality, right? It can be a little standoffish, right? So whether it's us or in other people, we may find we encounter language that's a little colder. But of course, it's always trying to get to sort of the higher ideal of what it's trying to express as Mercury moves through that sign. And we'll see it's going to make a conjunction later in the month with Saturn, so that's going to bring a heaviness to the languaging. But thinking with this square, what's trying to get through now is these much more, as I said, it's a fixed square, so it's coming from fixed Earth over here in Taurus. And this whole, 7-year cycle of Uranus in Taurus has really been all about, as I called it, the revolution in what we value. Second house issues, Taurus issues. What do we value? What are the resources that we need in order to feel safe, in order to feel secure, in order to survive? Brings up issues of money and wealth and material resources. It brings up issues of sex and reproductive survival. It brings up issues of our relationship to the environment, to the earth, to the planet, the ultimate resource, right? The ultimate security need. If we don't have this planet in its very delicately balanced ecosystem, game over, right? And I think we're getting just a lot. It seems to be everywhere. It's really showing up in so many facets of our society in terms of what's going on with our relationship with Mother Earth. And I really feel like this period of Uranus in Taurus is a wake-up call. It's really forcing us to see and to revolutionize how we relate to the planet. And it's calling us to do it on an individual basis and on a community basis, on a collective basis. And there are, we're going to continue to get a lot of challenges from the environment over the course of this transit. But here, there's a chance for new ideas to come through, right? There's a lot of innovation out there about, how do we improve and change our entire the entire industrial agricultural system? How do we grow foods that are better for the environment? How do we reclaim the soil? All these hydroponic ideas and indoor growing, and just there's an immense amount of energy being put into some of these alternative food systems and agriculture that I think are super helpful, right? And having this Mercury in Aquarius, right? Innovation, right? This is the sign of Uranus. So this square has, squares have challenge. They're tense. They're difficult. They need to be worked out. They need energy in order to be fused and to be harmonized. So I think there's a lot of potential in this square, and I would expect that we could do some good things. So really thinking about, our own connection to the earth. What is our diet? Does our diet reflect a harmonized and balanced and a respect for the environment? Or are we eating foods and not taking good care of our bodies, right? Because the Taurus is all about the body, the physical sensations of the body. So something to just think about, and it may come up, or you may just recognize or notice some of these new ideas that are percolating. And if you have an interest and a passion in it, align yourself with some of those things. use your resources, your money, your value, and purchase foods that are maybe grown organically or locally or in a more humane way. If you are a carnivore, I'm not passing judgment. I'm just saying reflect and see what feels right for you, right? Because this could be a good time to reflect on that. So let's move forward to, starting with the 26th, a couple days later, this Mercury is going to be moving into its aspect with Saturn. So for the entire week from 10-day period really, from February 26th to March 6th, but it'll be exact on the 2nd. And we're going to talk a lot about March 2nd here. But this Mercury-Saturn conjunction coming our way. And here's where, you get a much heavier, more practically minded mental orientation, right? There's a weightiness to Mercury-Saturn conjunctions, right? The ideas all have to serve a purpose. Very practical, very service-oriented, very public or socially facing, right? Ideas about tradition, ideas about the past. Saturn is linked to the past in a lot of ways. But it's in Aquarius, and remember, Saturn is the ancient co-ruler of Aquarius. So it is aligned with those values of innovation. But it's always one that's puzzled me. I have a hard time aligning Saturn with my notion of Aquarius. As a modern astrologer, I associate it with Uranus and the exact almost antithesis of Saturn, right? It's like Saturn is the known and the limits, and Uranus is the unknown and the unlimited, right? And I feel like Aquarius has that quality, but we also think about it as we mentioned, it's a fixed sign, right? It can be rigid. It can be sort of narrow in its thinking. It's like my way or the highway, right? And that has a Saturn quality. I think that's the part of Aquarius that Saturn tends to bring out in us. So, just consider this time of, having a little more seriousness to your thoughts, your words, your ideas, what you communicate, what you express. The idea of thinking twice before you speak, making sure what you're saying has merit, not just speaking glibly. Being really more serious thoughts, right? Weighty thoughts. So now I'm going to move to March 2nd. And as I sort of talked about a little bit, to me, this sets up as one of the most significant days of the entire year of 2022, astrologically speaking. As I look, it's like, wow, this is a powerful day. Now, why do I say that? Well, first of all, this is big. The triple transit trigger. Pluto, Mars, Venus, conjunct in Capricorn. And I talked about this a little bit, right? We set up talking about Venus and Mars, but now we're bringing Pluto into the picture, right? So you consider all of that powerfully constellated desire energy, right? All of this sexuality and potency that you get when you mix Venus and Mars. Just that alone. Now you bring Pluto into the conversation, and all of a sudden it just gets deep. It gets raw. It gets powerful. It gets primordial. It gets libidinal. It can get compulsive, right? It can become incredibly, it can get dangerous. It can get violent. It can get very unconscious, right? This is a really powerful configuration, and one, it's sort of a handle, it should have a handle with care label, this configuration, because, I look at what constellates between these three planets in combination, right? On the one hand, we have, hot-blooded primal nature. It's just fueling the most deepest desires within us all, this instinct that we have. We are animals. We are mammals. We are sexual creatures. And this is really triggering our desire nature. It can bring out conditions of this profound romance, right? When you get Pluto and Venus together, right? It's a really deep sense of the beautiful, right? It can connote issues of sexual healing, right? Pluto at its highest expression has that quality of transformation, right? It wants to transform, it wants to heal, right? So the sexual nature could be healed through this, rituals and sort of ceremonies, sacred sexuality, issues such as tantra or kundalini, right? Those kind of energies where you're going into sexual union with the intention of making it spiritual or the intention of having healing results. Sex therapy, these kinds of things, perfectly constellated and supported by this energy. The idea that we can balance out the yin and the yang, right? Venus and Mars, yin and yang, coming together through this transformational, transfiguring power of Pluto. Very powerful. Dynamic creative work, right? When we think about desire, we think about sexuality. What is that? It's creativity. It's our urge to create. It's the eros, the erotic that runs through us all. And sort of, you can think of eros as the life force of the universe, right? There's this desire to produce, to create, right? The desire of God, the creative force that is behind the creator of all creation, right? This has that quality to it. And as I mentioned, Kundalini and Tantra, right? High, intense, deep spiritual practices that bring in our desire, that acknowledge the body as part of the equation, that sexuality can be sacred. But on the other side of the coin, you can see some of the shadow sides of this configuration showing up, right? Where obsessive attractions, right? I think of that movie Fatal Attraction from the 80s. This has that fatal attraction type of quality to it. It has the notion of the femme fatale, right? Venus and Pluto, that dark sort of noir sort of vibe to it. Brutal sexuality, right? Mars and Pluto together, those are two of the most aggressive and can be very violently constellated. And so you can get issues of sexual violence under this type of configuration. The idea of sexual power trips, right? We can just get really full of ourselves about our own sexuality, our own potency, about our own self-worth. It just can get heavily distorted with this configuration. This is the perfect, sort of perfect storm for a political sex scandal, right? This is all of the things aligned, right? Pluto is a very political symbol, right? And so Venus, Mars, Pluto just screams sexual scandal and the exposure, right? Something that has been hidden or secret. Pluto very secretive, and then coming to light with all this energy and attention. It just erupts to the surface in a very sudden and libidinal or volcanic type of way. The idea of sex trafficking and crime rings is constituted by this signature. It's so interesting because something that we've been hearing a lot about is Los Angeles is hosting the Super Bowl today. And there's just been a ton of media around on our local news about sex trafficking because there's this sense that, tens of thousands of men descending on a city for this event that supposedly it coincides with an increase in sex trafficking in any city that hosts the Super Bowl. And some of that has been debunked by statisticians and science and data, but yet the myth or the idea of it persists. And so that comes up every year at this time here in America. And it's interesting that it's being sort of constellated by this particular configuration. And then, satanic sex cults, right? This is the kind of dark, heavier energy that these three planetary alignments can configure. So some heavy-duty energy there. So that's big in and of itself. And we see, though, that it's making this really harmonious aspect to the nodal axis. So there's something, when we talked about sexual healing as part of this configuration, I really see that showing up with that sextile to Mercury, or to the South Node in Scorpio. Because I think that really is connected with a deep collective healing of our sexuality. I think a lot of the distortion that we've suffered under, thousands of years of sort of religious and highly patriarchal rule, it's all coming under serious review during this time of transition. And I think we're all being called to reflect on our past, our emotional past, our sexual ideas and identity, and to come to a new understanding of it that we are going to bring forth into this North Node Taurus symbol and really embody something that is much more connected to the physical, to the sensational, to the sensual, to that Taurus Venus aspect. And this entire period, right, this 18-month cycle that we're in with the nodes moving through Scorpio and Taurus, this is the Venus-Mars axis, right? Mars is the traditional ruler of Scorpio, along with Pluto, and Venus is the symbol of Taurus. And now you have all three of these planets in this harmonious alignment with the nodal axis. This is just one of those like divinely inspired moments and periods. It's a window. It's a gateway, right? This whole thing is going to be in effect for several weeks, right? It's going to culminate here on March 2nd. But you'll feel it coming into this period, and then it will continue in this entire Venus-Mars cycle. It's going to last for the better part of the next year, right? This is the seed tone of that cycle. So what happens is Venus will start to move much faster than Mars. It'll separate from this conjunction, but that seed is planted, and as it moves forth, it carries forth this message. And so Venus will be carrying its encounter not only with Mars this year, but Pluto. So this transformational energy that we've been talking about so much with Pluto and Capricorn, I feel like we're getting a chance to apply some of the Venusian qualities to that transformation. How can we do it in a more feminine way? How can we do it in a more compassionate way, with kindness, with caring, with art, with beauty, right? Creativity, right? With love and caring, aesthetically or otherwise, right? I feel like there's this window or gateway opening for a more beautiful engagement with how we relate to society, the society we want to create, how we want to change it for the better, to improve it, to beautify it, to, I think, address and redress some of the ugliness that we see in the world. How do we beautify it? And how do we beautify our own lives and our own structure and our own world? It starts there, right? So this is just one of those really powerful alignments. And this whole day with so much going on, and I'm pointing out the fact that everything is in very harmonious aspect, because there's two other real big pieces to this day and this configuration. So massive triple conjunction here in Capricorn. Well, this is also the very day of the Pisces new moon, right? So here we have Sun, Moon in Pisces, conjunct Jupiter. Like, that's a massive deal. And if we look at what that constitutes here, Sun, Moon, Pisces, right? So every new moon, obviously, a new lunar cycle begins, and it takes the theme of that solar month, that solar period, for the entire lunar cycle. So we're coming into this Pisces lunation, and it's always a very deep and emotional lunar cycle. The moon going through Pisces, right, or initiating with the sun. What is the intention, as we talked about with Sun in Pisces, right? Connecting to source, connecting to a depth, to the creative, to the imaginal, to the musical, to the transcendent, to the poetic, right? Now the moon is going to reflect on that, and it's going to evolve it over the course of its cycle, which will culminate in that Virgo full moon that we'll have 2 weeks from this day. But just if you start to look at some of the combinations, right, that can be constellated by this. So the idea of the sun and self-expression, the moon is self-reflection, and the Pisces on what do I believe? What do I believe in? What do I have faith in? What moves me? What is my passion, right? We can get a sense of, the deeply creative period, right? You see that both the sun and Pisces constitute this notion of creativity, right? And the moon comes in and nurtures and cares for that creative nature, right? It brings this maternal and compassionate feeling, right? We are getting a chance to really go deep with this configuration, which is why I'm saying this is, in alignment with unconditional love, because that's really what this is. And then you throw Jupiter in the equation, and Jupiter just expands everything it comes into contact with. So all of those potentials are exacerbated. Jupiter is also the traditional ruler of Pisces, so very at home in this sign, very comfortable giving its gifts and its benefits, right? It can really be generous. There's a huge sort of generosity, a big, kind-hearted nature to this particular lunation, this cycle. And it's also coming into its own aspect with Neptune, the Lord of Pisces, right? Together, the two co-rulers of this sign. This is a really just another massively significant day, right? And again, it also is in this harmonious relationship with the nodal axis. The opposite, right? It's sextile the north, trining that south node in Scorpio. Water trine, right? Again, coming in touch with our deepest emotions. The emotions of our own personal and interpersonal sexuality, and the emotions of our connection to all of humanity, to the creator, to the creative force, God or goddess, whatever you resonate with or align with spiritually. This is a wonderful time to really deepen any spiritual practice, to initiate a new form of that practice, to get involved in something in a community that is focused on some of these spiritual principles, because it is so aligned with the destiny of our collective alignment, right? These two really transcendental symbols, Pluto and Neptune, connecting to the nodal axis, the destiny, the evolution of our consciousness. Pretty beautiful alignment. And then on top of it all, we've got the exact conjunction of Mercury and Saturn here in Aquarius, right? And it's a nice balance to a lot of the dreaminess of all this Pisces energy, because this can be, as we always talk about, we have the shadow and the light. So the light side of this is just transcendental, unconditional love, compassion, empathy, a deep understanding and a listening to all, and respect for all people. We are all one. We are all in this together. And I hope that can constitute that, and that perspective, as another one of the silver linings of this entire cycle that we're in, this coronavirus and this global pandemic, and the perspective that we've been given, right? It's very global. We're seeing how it's no one is immune from this virus and from this event and from how we handle it. It just spreads around the world. You can't contain it. It requires the coordination and the cooperation of the entire planet in order to really, really handle. And I think that's what's being constellated here. Yet you've got, Mercury and Saturn keeping a very stern and rational perspective on everything, right? It's just sort of holding ground in the middle of all this sort of dreaminess on the one hand and this intensity on the other, and just look at how it's literally sitting in the middle, right? And as I said, we are really emphasizing the last three archetypes of the zodiac cycle, the last quadrant: Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces. This is a really interesting configuration here. You don't see this very often, which is why I say I feel like this is one of the signature days of all of 2022. So you definitely want to mark your calendars for this one. I always encourage some sort of intention or a small personal ritual that you do on the new moon in every lunation. But boy, this one is a real sort of stellar, what do they call it, a red letter day? I don't even know where that phrase comes from, but I think this qualifies as a red letter day. I hope that's not about the scarlet letter, because that would seem like a misaligned reference. But just you can just see it in the chart, and so hopefully you'll be able to take advantage of this alignment. You know, and it doesn't last. It starts to move, you know, very quickly. We move out of it, and like, you know, the very next day we see that this Saturn and Mercury comes into a T-square with the nodal axis. So suddenly all of that dreamy opportunity, now we have to sort of really manifest it and do something very practical about it. Saturn is going to demand results. Saturn demands that you put in the work, right? The healing is going to take work. The new embodied nature is going to take work. Changing our diets and our habits is going to take work, right? Improving the quality of our food and our environment is going to take work. It's going to take innovation. It's going to take vision. It's likely going to require that we get in right relationship with our technology. Aquarius, a very scientific and technological sign. But at its best, it is aligned and in service to the greater good of all humanity. It does not just serve one individual, one company, one socioeconomic class. It is putting these tools to work in service of a higher good, of an ideal society, right? So hopefully this constitutes that kind of energy. And again, can always go the shadow side, and it can get a very dark use of communication technology, right? Mercury, Saturn, Aquarius, right? We have to be aware of, you know, being lied to, misinformation, politically motivated communications, things of that nature. But, you know, I'm a Sag rising, so I'm always trying to maintain an optimistic outlook. It's just my nature. I don't have time to be pessimistic. It's no fun. So I want to move through the last few. There's just so much here. My goodness. I wonder if I want to skip over a few of these. Well, March 6th is interesting because we get Venus and Mars moving together in lockstep into Aquarius. So after that contact with Pluto and Capricorn, right away, that energy starts to shift, and now we're moving into Aquarius. We're moving into air. We're moving into ideas and a much more mentally focused energy pattern for our desire nature. The desire to change society, to improve, to embrace and engage with a more technically sophisticated, scientific, rationally minded, solution-based, innovative, progressive type of energy, right? So then suddenly, you know, we're getting this really powerful Aquarian energy now, as we've got now 4 planets moving through the sign. So the shift comes from that Capricorn emphasis into Aquarius. And these two archetypes, it feels like this is the big move of this time in our cycle, right? We had the grand conjunction of Jupiter and Aquarius at 0 degrees. Jupiter and Saturn at 0 degrees Aquarius, the shift from Capricorn to Aquarius, the shift from the patriarchy and the top-down dominator culture into something that's much more decentralized, that's roots, grassroots, ground up, peer-to-peer, the hope and the optimism that things like blockchain and Bitcoin and this whole notion of Web3, of a decentralized power structure, all of these things are constellated in this transition from Capricorn to Aquarius, to my mind. It's just how I see it. and I see it playing out everywhere. So with these, every cycle, every year, we get these triggers, right? And this is going to be a big one. Venus and Mars, bringing our passion, bringing beauty, bringing aesthetics and art into that domain. Let's make, if we're going to build a new world together, why not build it in a beautiful, aesthetically pleasing way? Just a thought. So we've got that going on. Saturn moving into a more exact square with the nodes as the month progresses by, here Mercury's moving into Pisces later in the month. So now our communication and our expression is going to be all of the feeling and emotion of that new moon in Pisces. Now it starts to, our mentality, our thoughts, our ideas, our communications, our expressions now take on that more Piscean, transcendental, compassionate, empathetic tone. So this is, again, this energy is just really, really powerful as we move into this Pisces season. And then I'll move forward. We could talk about a lot more, but March 18th, when does that happen? Looks like, yeah, sometime around 2 a.m., 12, just after midnight here, we are going to get the Virgo full moon, right? So now we've got, again, all that was initiated on March 2nd, that very monumental day. Now, 2 weeks later, we get the culmination of that energy with the moon coming into Virgo, opposing the Pisces sun, which has now had its own contact with Jupiter and with Neptune, right? It's really transcendental energy. And now we're working the axis. And again, as I said, the moon's sort of all alone for half of the month, every month during this time that we're in, because all the planets are on one side of the sky. So when the moon moves through, from Gemini into Sagittarius, it's all alone in the sky. And so it's making sort of more challenging aspects, or there's some trines, but it makes oppositions to all of these positions as it does so. And so there's this sense of, the moon being all by herself and all alone to sort of process this this full moon, right? And everything that is constituted by a Virgo full moon. And if you think about that archetype, it's the archetype of a sense of lack, a sense of inadequacy, a sense of a need to improve. It brings up issues of guilt and shame and self-worth. Virgo is constantly striving to overcome that feeling. It wants to work harder. It's very self-critical and very critical of others. It's very discerning, right? And again, it's an earth sign. It's mutable earth, right? So it does all of these things, and it can get a really bad rep. I think Virgo is one of those signs that has a bad rep in astrology, and people have a hard time with its energy, and it is a difficult archetype. It's one of the it's like the natural inconjunct. It's why, Virgo and Scorpio are really difficult energies to work with and work through. But all of them are required and necessary to work with and work through. Virgo is no exception. And so this full moon, we're really going to be called to self-reflect on what are we trying to improve? How can we show up better? How could we work harder? What do we need to change within our daily routines, our work lives, our habits, our health? How are we taking care of ourselves? The self-nurturing, the self-care. Are we aligned with our bodies? Earth, right? What needs to change, mutate, right? Mutable earth, Virgo. And we see that it's in, opposition to the sun. Of course, it's a full moon, but it's this entire power stellium in Pisces now. So the need to improve so that we can come into a more transcendent and spiritual and empathetic and compassionate and unconditional love with all of our relations and with all of humanity and with all of the cosmos, right? Like, how do we get that divine alignment? We're getting glimpses of what we need to do for ourselves to improve so that we can come to the world bringing our highest or higher self. And, you know, it's also making a trine with Pluto here, very close, right? So there's this Pluto energy now that we initiated earlier in the month. Now the moon in her fullness reflecting on that need to transform, to transcend, to transmute, to transfigure, to evolve, right? From Virgo, how do we improve? How do we perfect, right? This is an earth trine. How do we make that Capricorn, that structure, that societal system, all the systems, better? The political, the economic, the social, the telecommunication, the education, right? All of these systems are coming under massive evolutionary pressure under this Pluto and Cap signature. And so this full moon says, hey, I've got some ideas on how we can improve these things. Coupled with all of this that we've been talking about, bringing a higher sense of value and beauty and aesthetics and a passion to what we're bringing to the communities and to our world. All things that make this Pisces season a really sort of juicy, emotional, inviting, and there's just a lot of really harmonious and well-aligned energy that is waiting to be worked with and manifested and explored and evolved. So a lot to think about for the next month as we end this solar year. So very appropriate ending of what has been, you know, a really challenging year if we think of all we've been through since the spring of 2021 and the last couple years. So, you know, all of these things are happening for a reason. We're working through these energies. These cycles are unfolding, you know, and we're recognizing them as that. We can see the cyclical patterns. One of the great benefits of astrology is an ability to pattern recognize and say, oh, we know what tends to happen when Venus and Mars come together, and we can get a sense of, oh, they're with Pluto and it's in Capricorn. Got it. This is constellated, right? But again, this is all taking place against a background of, you know, we're also, the sun's evolving around the galaxy. Galaxies are evolving around the galactic centers, and the universe is probably moving around other universes. So, what's that old saying? You never cross the same river twice. You never step in the same river twice. So it's all novel, right? There's a pattern that we can recognize, and it's configured, but every opportunity is a new opportunity. Every day is a new day. We've never been here before. So despite the similarities, there's something unique about this moment. There's something novel. And you and I, we've never been here before at this time with this configuration. So what are we bringing to the table? That's a really good question to ask yourself, and a good sort of perspective and orientation to take on all of this, isn't it? So I hope you have the opportunity to think about some of these things, set an intention, do something special on March 2nd for sure, and just really be more attuned and aware. You want to have your antenna up during that time, because there's a lot of downloads coming, a lot of energy patterns being configured by this, so it's worth paying attention to. All right, till next time, and the next time we'll be coming to you from the eastern seaboard, so we'll see what that portends. So until then, Sat Nam, everyone.